Have you ever wondered how it's going for other parents? Are they struggling with the same things you are? How were those first few weeks for them? Today, we're chatting with my co founder, Quentin Tai. Quentin is a girl dad to a wonderful 4-year-old girl, and he's working with me to create the starterset.com, a new service for parents that will help them find everything they need for each baby milestone, personalized for their families. Less research, less stress, more time to spend on the things that matter. On today's show, we're going to talk a little bit about the starter set and what inspired it, but we'll also talk about what those first few weeks with baby were like for us and the advice we live by, at least some of the time. This is Getting Started with Baby, the podcast that brings you practical tips, loved products, and lived experience from parents who've been there, brought to you by thestarterset.com. I'm your host, Jane Dashevsky, a mom on the other side of 2 under 2, and I'm working to make this parenting journey a little bit easier. Let's get into it. Quentin, welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your family?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I am 38. I have a 4-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old dog. We live in Baltimore and be interested in having another child.
It's funny, sometimes people will ask me, especially because I did the 2 under 2 thing, like, oh, having the second one, that must have been so tough, especially because they were so close in age. And I found that transition from 0 to 1 to be super hard. But that transition from 1 to 2, glorious. I feel like I could really enjoy that second infant phase and the peacefulness.
Yeah, very much so. I actually really enjoyed the 0 to 6 month phase. Not all of it, obviously, but I look back on it fondly.
I'm glad I got that moment as well to look back on it fondly, because that first time I was definitely very anxious. So as we talked a little bit about in the intro, we're the founders of the Starter Set, which is a service that we're working on to help parents find just the right things at the right time, personalized for their families. I want to tell listeners here a little bit about what inspired it. It was really inspired by my own parenting journey. I was balancing a high pressure job. I had 2 kids under 2 and other things, of course, going on in life. And I just found myself feeling like I was falling behind. I was forgetting to order the next size up in clothes or forgetting what milestone I was on. And my brain just felt so full. I used to joke at that time that I had so many things going on that I was leaving remote controls in the refrigerator. I just couldn't keep it together at some point. And I was finding myself doing research for the kids at midnight after I'd been done with emails, after everyone was asleep. And I was looking at things like travel strollers and high chairs. And when it was time to transition to the convertible car seat, I felt like I was just spending hours looking at retailers, comparing things on blogs, trying to figure out what influencers thought. And it just didn't feel good. Being in that, what felt like an infinite research loop, just didn't feel good. And I found myself really wishing that there was something out there that just knew me, understood my family, and could just help recommend stuff. That's what we're trying to do here. And when I think about, even when you get started, that baby registry phase, which is where we're starting with the service, you can be looking at as many as 80 different products and spending more than 40 hours putting this thing together, putting that baby registry together. And it just is a lot. That's really where we're focused, helping parents make that process easier, solving for that pain. And Quentin, you joined me pretty recently. Tell me a little bit about what inspired you to want to build this.
So as a parent of a young child and as someone who has also had many friends who also recently had children, parenting just completely consumes your life. And that's all we talk about now, right? Like, what's the next thing that we're going to do with her? Who's going to do bedtime tonight? What's she going to wear tomorrow? All of our conversations with our friends, same thing. It's all just about the kids. Just felt that anything we could do to take away from the burden of parenthood and make it more enjoyable would be a very noble problem to go after. And also selfishly, it would hopefully be something that would help me
Uh-huh.
and my friends.
I can relate to that experience. It's interesting that you kind of described it as all consuming and how it ends up being somehow everything you talk about. I know my husband and I joke about that too. When we finally make it out to a date night, somehow we just spend all the time talking about how adorable the kids are. I guess that's just the phase of life now. Talk to me a little bit about those first weeks becoming a parent and what that was like for you and your wife.
Yeah, the first few weeks were definitely harder than expected for both of us. We took classes. We had other friends who had also recently had children. We had our parents around to like tell us stories of what we were like when we were little, but nothing's really the same as actually doing it. It definitely was much harder than we expected. And I think the hardest part for me, at least, was the mental aspect. Obviously, the lack of sleep doesn't help. It's a big new thing that you're transitioning into. There's so many fears. And then on top of all that, you're just kind of figuring out how to rebalance everything in your life from a mental perspective, too, right? Right? It's like, all right, what is most important to me now? This kid, keeping this thing alive and making sure it thrives. Where do my dreams fall in comparison to that? And you kind of have to figure out how to place that. It was just a very, very draining time that was definitely harder than expected. We got through, as everyone will.
It's super interesting because I remember asking parents around me of young kids, like, oh, was it harder than you expected? No one said easier, but I was like, was it easier? And it's funny. Everyone said it was harder. And I thought to myself, we've all been doing this for a long time as humans and we'll figure it out. And it's like what you said, it's such a big, momentous life change. You exit the hospital or birthing center or wherever you're leaving from. We gave birth in a hospital and you have to bring the car seat with you. You load the baby in the car seat and they check that you've done that right, but then they just send you on your way, right? It's like, good luck. It's an interesting thing because everyone will tell you that it's harder. And then you go through it, and the lack of sleep is such a real contributing factor to things. No matter how much you were prepared, how much you wanted the baby, what's going on in your life, it is such a big change that you just can't really think about how you're going to react or what it's going to mean for you or how you're going to deal with all the changes that are coming up, plus lack of sleep before you go through it.
I'd also add that, like I mentioned earlier, I look fondly back on the first few months compared to my wife. She looks back on it and is just very happy that is past
Yeah.
because it was a really rough time. I can distinctly remember trying to put my daughter down at one point. I think I was just like holding her in a rocking chair and thinking about when she gets married, just something super mushy like that. I don't know. I guess that's how I dealt with it. Think of something really happy to deal with the pain and fatigue of the current moment.
I think is a good segue to even thinking about what are some of the ways that kind of helped you navigate those early days. One of the things that what you just said makes me think about is everyone always talks to you about how everything in babyhood and having children is a phase. And when you're in those first, whatever it is, 6 to 8 weeks, like that phase, probably because of the lack of sleep, feels like it will never end. You feel like you're going to be there forever. Maybe not everybody, but I certainly felt like I was going to be there forever. And I remember we got a moment to go walk our dog and sit outside by ourselves in those early days after our first one. And my husband and I were just like, did we ruin our lives? And I think we were like 3 weeks in or something. And it's funny when you think about in retrospect that you were going through it. And it just really calls into question like, oh man, stuff is really just a phase. Like this, we'll get through it. And living through it, I think you have that perspective like, oh, my toddler's screaming on the floor. They'll get over it. We'll get through this. You said your wife had a little bit of a different experience. What helped pull you through?
Well, I guess first of all, we were very fortunate and had both sets of grandparents available to help. So my mom stayed with us for a month at least. And Liz's mom would come and stay for a few days to a week at a time. Obviously, that helped a lot. The thing that helped the most was they always say like it takes a village. That's in reference to raising kids, obviously. And I think it's important to create your village. I live in Baltimore, and most of my friends back home are an hour south of me. We weren't able to go back as often as I'd like, but I think it's still important to keep in touch with them, especially because we were all new parents and we're all going through the same thing. I think the thing that really helped me was talking to them and hearing from them about what they're going through. I think that was really important to help us not feel alone and like that we were doing something that isn't possible or that no one's ever done before. So yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
think the creating your village is the piece of advice I would give.
I think that's a good one. And I know for some people, especially the way that work is in the US, sometimes people aren't close to their families. And so they're really in this position of creating their own village. And maybe before the baby, they were just used to kind of figuring stuff out on their own. But I will say I relate to that advice as well. Seattle, where I'm located, there is a program called PEPS. And basically, PEPS organizes groups for new moms, expecting moms, moms and dads, that helps create a group of people who are going through the exact same phase as you are with your kids, like around your neighborhood. You end up in this group with people who are really in it at the same place you are, and everybody kind of shares different experiences that are having different stories. And I also had my parents come and help for a period, and I've had some friends who had kids at that point. But there's just this thing about talking to people who are in the exact same phase as you are. It just makes such a big difference. Part of it because it helps put things in perspective, like you said, and part of it just because
You can give each other advice.
you can give each other advice. Totally. One of the things that happens as you have a baby is that you just get inundated with advice, some helpful, some not very helpful, some neutral, I guess. Was there a piece of advice that you felt just really ended up resonating with you and you just kind of like live by it?
I think the answer is no. I think what I came away with in terms of the advice that everyone gave was that it's not always going to work out for you, right? Everyone's kid is different. They have different preferences. They have different things that they need or want. And what you should do is just get as much information as you can from other people. Definitely listen to all the advice, but think of them as like a data point that you can maybe use to help yourself. And if not yourself, then maybe someone else who's a new parent.
I think for me, the advice I carry around is some of what we kind of shared earlier, which is that everything is a phase. And I still use it to this day with my kids being now 2.5 and 4. I mean, these days we're deep in the twos with my son who has decided that for everything we say no. And we can't possibly make anything easy. In this moment, still to this day, I remind myself that everything is a phase. I think the other piece of advice I remember getting in this one is for like the very early stage when you have this teeny tiny baby who seems so fragile. Someone told me that babies certainly are fragile, you have to be careful, but they're not as fragile as people sometimes make them out to be. And so for new parents, sometimes they get very anxious about doing things wrong or when the baby cries. And I think that piece of advice from an experienced parent just helped me feel like, okay, everything will be okay. We're going to be careful, but you got to get used to holding the baby and changing the baby and bathing the baby and not be nervous about each phase of this. And I think that helped ground me. Again, that this is a person and not a porcelain egg. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I actually have a story for that. We were at the hospital and it was probably like 3 hours after my daughter was born. And I think she was crying and we were just like, not sure what to do. So we called a nurse over and we're like, hey, is something wrong? Can you take a look at her? And she just picks her up, holds her up, and tilts her to the side, tilts her to the side in the other direction and says, no, she looks fine, and just hands her back. And we were horrified. We were like, what? But, looking back, obviously this person's very experienced. She's around babies literally the entire day for her job. In the moment, we had a little bit of a hard time realizing that, oh yeah, this is very okay. The baby isn't that fragile, but it's much easier to understand that the second time around.
We talked a bit about advice, which is, of course, always very helpful. But as we know, the starter set is really going to be about helping parents sort through the products and services that are available for their families. And obviously, as a result of that, we have to ask, was there a product or service that was a game changer in your family?
I loved the swaddle, and I thought it was amazing. I think we had one with the Velcro, but I preferred the one that was just extra stretchy and soft. And
Mhm.
I just wrapped that thing around her and tucked it in, and it seemed to always have a calming effect. So for me, it would be the swaddle, a super soft and stretchy one.
Oh man, you went full baby burrito. You did not do
Mm,
the Velcro, it sounds like.
nope, nope.
That is very impressive. You could not get little flaily baby limbs into a non-Velcro swaddle. Was there a particular version of that non-Velcro swaddle that you'd recommend?
We really liked using the copper pearl swaddle blanket.
Awesome.
Um, they were all just so soft, and we always gave that out as a gift to any of our friends that also had kids.
Yeah, that's funny. The things from my favorites list also make it to all of the people that I know who are pregnant as
Yep.
well. Yeah, I think for us, well, yeah, my kids were not daytime sleepers and they did not like being worn as babies. So that meant that it was very hard to get anything done during the day. We really needed places for the baby to hang out so we could do a thing at some point. We really swore by the Graco simple sway swing because our kids loved swinging.
Mm.
Uh, they would relax, there'd be music playing, and it was the only place during the day that they could be relaxed and entertained for like a moment while I washed a dish or something. And because it's small, that could be like, moved around places.
Mm.
Coincidentally, they also did not really enjoy bouncer chairs. They really wanted the swinging motion.
Oh, interesting.
That's another one of those. Every parent will have different experiences because some kids only want to be in the bouncer chair. Some kids only want to be in a swing. Some kids don't want to be strapped into anything. Some kids want to be worn around. So that one ends up being such a baby preference situation.
Yep.
What about a product or service that you thought you needed, but turns out you really didn't need or you didn't need it as early as you got it?
We were gifted the Mamaroo, and that thing was completely useless for us.
Yeah.
I think it's mostly the mechanical sound that it made, or
Huh.
it just wasn't hidden enough behind everything else. The motion itself was smooth enough, but I think our daughter just preferred to be carried. Even now, when I'm just standing, I'll still bounce a little bit, especially if I see a baby or am like in thinking about babies at all. I just automatically sway. And I think it's just from
Huh.
doing that while holding my daughter when she was little. The Mamaroo just scared her a little bit.
Like I mentioned, I feel like everyone has such different experiences with their kids, like would be calming for their kids and what was definitely not a thing that they wanted to do. Those babies get pretty opinionated pretty fast. So you'll know. When I think about it for us, I didn't grow up with little brothers or sisters, and I never babysat. And so my experience with babies was pretty much what you see on TV, I guess. I don't know, occasional friend baby or coworker baby or something like that. But I think what I found funny in retrospect is how many toys and things I bought for an infant. And you realize this infant can't even hold their head. What was I thinking? Why do I have this stuff? But there's just so many funny moments where we tried to get our first, by the second one, we got it. But for the first, we were taking her to the zoo at 3 months being like, do you think she's reacting? You know what I mean? I don't know what we were thinking, but definitely with the toys. They're not going to be interested in a stuffed animal yet. I mean, maybe you had a different experience with that, but I just found that there were so many things we got that were marketed for 0 to 6 months. Yeah, I would say definitely be a little bit more sparing on the toys. But if you are going to get a toy, I have yet to meet a baby who is not into Freddie the Lamaze Firefly. Have you seen that one? Have you not heard of this one? Okay, so it was gifted to me by my neighbor who had just had a baby. It wasn't even on my radar. Now I give it to everybody. Basically, it's this firefly that has black and white patterns on one side and crinkly sounds and mirrors and teething rings. It's on one of those all-in-one toys because initially babies can only see sharp contrasts and things that are close to them. Every baby I've known has been super obsessed with that toy, but every other toy, it took a while. Don't overdo the toys early on is, I guess, my advice.
Agreed. Yeah, I think all of our toys were mostly played with by our friends' kids who were a few months older that came over.
Yeah, it seems so obvious in retrospect. So many toys marketed at you in those early days. Of course you want the beautiful stuffed bunny, but yeah, your kid's not going to care about that for maybe the entire first year.
Yeah. Yep.
Depends on the kid, I guess. That kind of hits at all of the things we wanted to cover today. Thank you, Quentin, for joining us for this very first episode of Getting Started with Baby. I'd love to hear your takeaway, but my takeaway from this is that everyone's going to have a different experience. Try to get advice from that village, build your own village, hear from other parents. It's going to be really important, but again, your experience will probably be some different, unique version of all of them.
Yeah. I think the same thing. The takeaway, I guess, would be that since everything is so unique to each person, do what works for you. Do what you need to survive the tough times and to will be it. You have to take care of yourself in order to take care of others. And guess what? You're taking care of an infant at this time. And if you don't find ways to keep yourself grounded, it's going to be tough. So yeah, take care of yourself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And I think that is something that people very often forget to do or feel guilty to do. Once you have an infant, you do need to make time for yourself and to take care of yourself because, like what you said, if you don't take care of yourself, you're going to have a hard time taking care of others, right? All right. Well, what's next for the starter set is that we are continuing to build and we're working really hard to get this launch done for the parents out there. Look out for our first product, which will be a personalized baby registry. If you're interested in learning more about what we're building or following along on our progress, please go to thestarterset.com and subscribe to our mailing list. Thank you so much for listening.